how we discover the conditions behind slow earthquakes that happen over weeks or even months. New research finds, this is an article on The Conversation, March 31st, 2020. Ike Fagering, Research Reader, School of Earth and Ocean Sciences, Cardiff University, Wales, of the UK. This reminds me of a couple of years ago. There was an earthquake discovered, a new type of an earthquake discovered that took place in the Anatolia Fault that stretches over the northwest part of Turkey, over Istanbul. And that was a quake, a slow quake that took over 40 days. And one geologist found it. And that's when they realized that those are very, very important and dangerous quakes, because it could be the harbinger for a bigger one to come. A bigger one being over 7 or 8 magnitude. Now, this article says you're probably familiar with earthquakes as relatively short, sharp shocks that can shake the ground, topple buildings, and tear ribs in the earth. These earthquakes and their aftershocks happen because although tectonic plates move at centimeters per year, this motion is seldom steady. Earthquakes result from a stick-slip motion, where rocks stick along fault planes while stress accumulates until a slip occurs, a bit like pulling on a stuck door until it suddenly opens. This slip also releases energy as the seismic wave that in large magnitude earthquakes create substantial damage. In the last 2 decades, another class of stick-slip motion has been discovered worldwide. These slow slip events last for weeks to months, compared to seconds to minutes for earthquakes. Slow slip events occur faster than average plate motion, but too slow to generate measurable seismic waves. This means they need to be studied by GPS networks rather than seismometers. Although their motion is slow, the amount of movement that occurs in a slow slip event is substantial. Earthquake magnitude depends on the distance that rocks move and the area this movement occurs over. Using the same definition, many slow slip events would have magnitude above 7 if they slipped at earthquake speeds. Slow slip events repeat at intervals of a year to a few years, compared to major earthquakes which have repeat times of hundreds of years or more. Slow slip events are actually very frequent. Even in the short time of a couple of decades that we've observed these types of slip, many cycles have occurred in several places, notably around the Pacific Rim, the Ring of Fire. Although slip events generally happen next to areas where faults are locked and expected to rupture in major earthquakes, it's therefore possible that these slow slip events can trigger earthquakes on neighboring locked faults. For example, it has been suggested that slow slip events preceded the 2011 magnitude 9.1 Tohoku earthquake in Japan, that was the cause of the tsunami in Fukushima as we know, and the 2014 magnitude 8.1 Iquique earthquake in Chile. That said, numerous slow slip events have also been observed without any immediate subsequent major earthquakes on neighboring faults. Earthquakes may also trigger slow slip. In particular, the magnitude 7.8 Kaikoura earthquake in New Zealand in 2016 triggered slow slip events up to 600 kilometers away from its epicenter. It's not known why some fault segments host slow slip and others host earthquakes. Neither is it known whether the same area can change behavior and host either slow slip or earthquakes at different times. It's therefore important to characterize the source of slow slip and find out what materials help create slow slip and under what conditions. It's a unique opportunity. The Haikurangi subduction zone, where the Pacific Ocean floor is pulled under New Zealand, the New Zealand continent, offshore New Zealand's North Island. That's where we had the White Island volcano going off December 9th. The North Island also has a supervolcano, the Taupo supervolcano. So the New Zealand North Island is potentially the country's largest earthquake fault and is a unique opportunity to investigate slow slip events. It's because slow slip here happens shallower and closer to the shoreline than anywhere else in the world. The slow slip events in New Zealand have been observed by onshore GPS and ocean bottom pressure sensors. Oceanic scientific drilling expeditions recently sampled sediments and installed observatories along this margin. These International Ocean Discovery Program expeditions, which drilled to just over 1 kilometer deep in the water depths of 3.5 kilometers in late 2017 and early 2018, revealed that the seafloor rocks and sediments hosting slow slip in Hikurangi are extremely variable. The range of rocks, described in a recent Science Advances paper led by Philip Barnes of NIWA, New Zealand's National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, include mudstones, sands, carbonates, and sedimentary deposits from oceanic volcanic eruptions. The seafloor samples show that the source of the slow slip is mixed. It's a mixture of very soft sediments and hard, solid rocks. The diverse seafloor sediments are not the only variability offshore off New Zealand. The seafloor itself is also very rough, including seamounts, which are submarine volcanoes, as we know, submarine mountains rising over the kilometer above the seafloor. This seafloor roughness also makes the fault very depending on where along it you are. The observations are consistent with the hypothesis where slow slip events occur in rocks that are transitional between moving steadily and moving in earthquakes. One way to think of this model is the rigid rocks interacting with softer. As rigid rocks interacting with softer, more docile, ductile surroundings, researchers using numerical simulations and laboratory experiments have also suggested that variable fault rocks can cause slow slip. But diverse fault rock is not the only model for the mechanics of slow slip. Another possibility is that pressurized fluids decrease frictional resistance and slip speed along faults. It's also possible that some rocks become stronger when they move faster, so that fault starts accelerating but slow down before reaching earthquake speeds. The recent discoveries in New Zealand may be applicable to other depths and locations around the world. However, future studies will undoubtedly lead to further insights and complexities, including in the relationship between slow slip events and earthquakes. This is on the conversation. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.